Hello, Louise here from Boost Your Career, and welcome to Boost Talk. Today I was in conversation with Joanna Geysen, from co-founder director of the Culture Group, and we've been talking all things energy. It took a really interesting turn when we started talking about vampires, until I realised that she was talking about eliminating energy vampires, those things that sap our energy and create that fall that we're all so familiar with. We also talked about intentional energy, what that requires and why it's important, and how to manage those surges of energy that we have during the day. So it was a pretty interesting conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Head on over to our website, boostyourcareer.com.au, and don't forget to like and comment. I'll see you there. Well, hi, Louise here from Boost Your Career, and welcome to Boost Talk. Today I am in conversation with Joanna Geysen, who is co-founder and director of the Culture Group, and we're going to be talking about all things energy and impact this afternoon. So thank you for joining me, Joanna.
Thanks for having me, Louise. This is great.
It is. It's fun to be able to just sit and have conversations with amazing women who are willing to share their experiences. Now,
Sounds great.
I've been reading the Culture Group's latest research paper, as you know.
Yep.
And I was particularly struck by numbers of things, but one in particular was the conversation around ways of working and how it's important that we move from a transactional way of engaging with people to a more motivational way of dealing with people. And I started reflecting on that and the impact that's going to have on particularly women in the workplace.
Yep.
And how their own energy is going to play into that. So it's sort of a two-pronged opening question. That love to get your views on that part of the research around ways of working transactional to motivation and what you're seeing. And then perhaps we could move that into a specific look at what that means for energy levels.
Definitely. Well, it's really interesting. It's a great topic. And I'm so happy to be joining you today. And I think that piece really around what you say around that movement and shift, there has been so much movement.
Yeah.
And particularly for not only women, but for everybody, around knowing what to do and not just being reactionary to things and in their environment, and really getting on the front foot and being motivational or what we call proactive. And that, I think, has been one of the biggest gaps in working. Obviously, we all had to change the ways in which we worked in the last couple of years for obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that transition back, I would say that's been one of the hardest things that people have had to master. You know, whether they're working together, whether they've been influenced or certainly encouraged to come back into offices, whether people are working front line roles and don't have the option of more flexibility in their work. All of it plays a part. And I think lifestyle's a really big thing. If I was to call out something, I think people's lifestyles have changed significantly over the last 3 years. And that's what we found throughout our entire research, is that piece around how do I manage things? You know, how do I get things done? And how do I not constantly stay on the back foot?
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
That's where our thoughts around, motivational impact really came into play. And people actually asking themselves that really important question of, where can I have impact?
Yeah.
And so that, to me, is probably the biggest reflective question. And I actually have to ask myself that on a weekly, if not daily basis, is what can I influence and where can I impact? Because I think that's been quite significant in terms of what we've all experienced.
Great question. Huge question, actually, when you start thinking around what that means around our intent, the impact that we have, where we can make changes, what that means for our daily lives. But you've touched on a couple of points there that I personally find really interesting. One of those is that we're in transition. We're in transition back to work. I get that. And even though lockdown was years ago,
Yeah.
it's still impacting, it's still transitional because of how organisations are managing that process.
Yeah.
What are you seeing around the concept that my energy impacts people around me?
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
we take that as a premise, how is that playing out in this new workplace?
I think how you impact people with your energy and in turn how that impacts others is quite significant. And a perfect example is someone who perhaps has worked from home over the during the lockdown period, and goes back into work, and there's very little people in the office.
Yeah.
And so what happens is they tend to get within themselves a little bit more because I think, well, I don't have an impact. My team's not here, or we're not all in on the same day, or where can I actually have those little moments of joy throughout my day?
Mm.
Because I think energy is it's very infectious. And when you're working with a group of people, and sometimes that means hybridly, or sometimes that means in the office, um, little tips and tricks that I find really useful are actually where you can, working in an environment where you go in and you actually are quite intentional about the meetings you have, about the people that you're meeting with, and also those little moments. We've all missed the round the water cooler conversations that were so common
Yep.
for all of us, and they're coming back, which is great. But I think more of that, releasing some of that dopamine, that is it's your happy hormone, where you're actually getting little shots of energy from people. So I would definitely recommend, and what we're seeing with quite a lot of clients is sometimes people are going into offices and they don't have the buzz perhaps that they used to have.
Mm.
So finding ways to create that buzz, because it actually gives you quite a natural hit of dopamine, and you feel happy. You feel happy when you connect with one person or a couple of people, or go out and have the coffee catch up. I'm a big fan of the coffee catch up, always have been, always will be. I think you can achieve so much just by having those short, sharp interactions with people. And that can really make such a difference. And then on the flip side, where you've got roles that are required to be on the ground, so whether that might be in aviation or retail, or, where people are with the general public a lot, is also um, reserving your energy. So having energy
Yeah.
reserves. So stopping, having that 5 minute or 2 minute even circuit breaker, particularly when you're in a high, when you're dealing with the public and you're in a high traffic zone where you're always dealing with public. It can be tough. It can be
Yeah.
really tough, and we've seen it across hospitals, the amazing work that nursing and hospital and clinical staff have done over the last couple of years has
Mm.
been unbelievably valuable.
Yeah.
So reserving your energy during really busy periods, you can be really intentional about your energy, but then you also have to look after yourself as well. I
Yeah.
think that's the other thing that I would be
Always
saying to
about
people as
balance,
well.
isn't it? Always
Well, it
about
is.
balance.
It definitely is, Louise. And I was actually personally reflecting on this, even having a consulting agency. We go through our own peaks and troughs
Yeah.
where, we deal with clients and things get really busy and they peak and it's all hands on deck. And then we go through lulls where, you then are sort of sitting there going, okay, what comes next?
Yeah.
And so I think reserving your energy, and working on some really great stuff in the background, that can absolutely help as well. So I'm a firm believer. I get a lot of energy from a lot of people. I'm a firm believer you don't get 100% of everything from any one person at any one time. I think you actually do need to surround yourself with different styles of people. And that's how you learn and grow. And
Yeah.
so I think that's probably been the biggest challenge. Hopefully I've answered that question
Oh no,
okay.
you've given us heaps. I love that you talked about it being infectious. I think that's a great
Yeah.
word, and I'd love to come back to that because I firmly believe that it is an infectious thing, energy, that we can be intentional around our energy, and the best way to manage that is to also be manage the reserves
Yeah.
around it at the same time. I think they're really fabulous points. Thank you. I was wondering if you see, because we're talking in Boost, we talk a lot about confidence and what that
Yep.
is and how that manifests itself. And I don't think there's any trickery or witchcraft in confidence. And one of the anchors that I see is energy. So I'm
Yep.
wondering if you can see a connection between confidence and energy and what you do to manage that.
I think there is a clear it's a lovely way to think about it, because I think often with confidence, it's sometimes the fear of the unknown, and that can
Yeah.
impact your energy quite significantly
Mm,
if perhaps you haven't tried something in a particular way as you might have done it before.
mm.
You've been given a new project. People are getting new roles all the time at the moment. We are finding a lot of organizations are doing a lot of restructures in their businesses. And people are wanting to get the culture stuff right. You know, the greatest asset in business is your people.
Yeah.
So being able to have confidence, I think, is something you've just keep pushing yourself to do something different. If not every day, each week,
Yeah.
is just keep pushing yourself to maybe just do one thing differently than what you didn't do the week before.
And which
So
will obviously impact your energy because it starts to work on passion. So
it,
that makes perfect sense to me. What other
yeah,
surge tricks do you have? So, I talk about energy surges and how we can
yeah.
create those in our lives. What are some of the things that you do to boost your energy?
Yeah, I think acknowledging also when you're having a tough time, that can also really help your energy. So
Yeah,
once
just
you've
saying it out
named
loud.
it,
Yeah,
saying it out loud,
yeah,
today I'm not
yeah,
physically feeling that well.
yeah.
Or
It's a great point.
um, there's a great model that we often use in our in a lot of our culture programs, and it looks at different elements of energy.
Mm,
So we look at physical energy, and you thinking about, I'm feeling a bit sluggish today. I'm just not feeling it. We also talk about emotional energy and how much we give to other people
mm.
and how much we share. Sometimes when we share a little bit about ourselves with someone else, that can actually help the other person. That's a good
Yeah.
source of energy as
Yeah,
well.
I've never thought about self-disclosure like that. I mean, I thought
Yeah.
about it as self, but the impact that has on other people, yeah, that can be incredibly powerful.
Very much so,
Yeah.
and I find, and obviously the well, you forms the basis of a trust. Start if you always start with positive intent, and
Yes.
there's lots of different
Yeah.
models and tricks and tips around trust. But
Mm,
I always come back to, am I coming at this from the area of positive intent? And by and large, people do. People aren't in the business of waking up in the morning and thinking, oh, how can I do an awful job today? People are more in the business of waking up and going, well, what can I do today? How can I fill my day?
yeah.
And I think the other one, and this might seem very, very simplistic and basic, but pets can be sensational
Oh,
for
yeah.
people. Um, Children can be sensational. They can also be very hard, but they can be sensational. So doing something totally out of the box.
Yeah.
So when you maybe are feeling not yourself, or you're finding your energy reserves are a little depleted, taking the dog for a walk, throwing the ball outside for the dog, or reading a story with one of your kids, or having a phone conversation with someone perhaps you haven't connected with for a while, but you might be a really good friend, and you might be saying, "Oh, I really need to get in touch with such and such." Picking up the phone and having that 5-minute conversation. It's amazing. It's food for the soul. That's how I like
Yeah.
to put it.
No, I
It's
think that's
really nice
beautiful
food for the
language.
soul.
And it's also prompted some thinking in me around pre and post, you know, I was going to say the pandemic, and yes, it is the pandemic. Let's talk about
Yeah.
pre-hybrid and now hybrid workplaces and what that means. And I was thinking around that these days it's more about managing your energy than it is about managing your time.
Yeah.
And that's a huge shift, intellectually, but also emotionally for people to manage that. So
Yeah.
I think they're beautiful suggestions around how we can create our own power surges. I love that. I
Yeah.
was also thinking around, so we talked about surges and how we can create the
Yep.
surges. I don't think we can forget that there are also the energy vampires. So there's
Yes.
those
The
things that
suckers.
yeah, and
Yeah.
we all have those. I suppose for me, it's two things: it's pessimists and egoists. I find them
Yes.
very vampirish when it comes to my own energy levels.
Yeah.
but but to be more positive around this, most of our lives these days is as we are doing right now. I'm in Brisbane, you're in Melbourne. We have to connect virtually. How do you work on your energy levels virtually? Because I'm feeding off you, you're feeding off me. How are we doing that without even thinking about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's a great question. I think it's about connecting with people in a hybrid environment that sometimes has nothing to do with work.
Yeah.
And that can help. And it's easy when you've got an intact team, I think. It can also get lost when you've got an intact team, because a lot of people would just go from meeting to meeting to meeting. I often find I like to put breaks in between my meetings, my virtual meetings, because what I'm not giving myself time for if I don't do that is I'm not giving myself that circuit breaker. I'm not giving myself time to think,
Yep.
time to digest the last meeting that I had.
Yep.
Sometimes you also need time to use someone as a sounding board,
Yeah.
because sometimes the message can get misconstrued on virtually. We all remember when that famous question. I remember years ago in training being asked, does email have tone?
Oh
And
yeah.
if
Oh
you put a lot of
sure.
exclamation marks, and if you put a lot of capital letters, it's an angry email. And I think it's the same when it comes to virtual. I think
Yeah.
we're learning a completely different way to communicate. I think when you can really connect with someone in a conversation and talk about things that you're like-minded in, it often helps with the conversation and keeping it on track.
Yeah.
Or if you're not got a lot in common, sometimes just asking a really great open question
Yeah.
can really help deflate perhaps something that might feel a bit awkward online.
Yeah.
And it might just put a pin in it. So, I can hear a dog in the background. What breed is he? Tell me about him. People love talking about
Yep.
their pets usually. I know I come back to the pet analogy, but it is an easy thing to talk about, or, how you're spending your time on the weekend, or, have you planned a holiday, or are you going on a holiday? Those little questions can lead to so much more. And it doesn't mean that, I'm not suggesting that all your work calls become social calls, but certainly I think if
There's
you
a
can,
connection, isn't there? That
yeah,
needs to
there's
be
a way to
made.
connect with
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
on, how they're tracking, how they're going.
See, we're talking now about energy. We need to be intentional around our
Yeah,
energy, just as we are intentional around our engagement skills and the connections that we make with other people.
definitely. Yeah.
There's a lot to be said about that authentic
Yeah.
understanding of self and how that plays out in all these different parts of our lives. And
Yeah.
that's what struck me in this conversation. It was, yes, we all talk about energy, and yes, I need to bolster my energy and all that. But in the end, it should be an intentional process, because I understand the impact that I'm having on people around me.
Mm. And I think that's a really great point, Louise. I know when I get off this call, I won't be just thinking about it from the questions that you asked, but I'll put the microscope under myself, and
Yeah,
I'll walk away and say, well, what have I been intentional about this week? And what conversations have I had virtually where I've left a mark or left an imprint
yeah,
and had an impact? And I think that's what you're talking about is using first up that self-disclosure piece. It's so important to just
yeah,
understand where you're at, where your head's at,
yeah.
and then be able to be intentional about what you do and give yourself time to think. So many clients I
Yes,
speak to that,
yeah,
it is quite unbelievable. They'll have themselves double booked for things, and
crazy.
I find it a little bit comical, actually, because I think how can you be in two places at once?
Yeah.
And a lot of people will get off a call and say, well, that could have been an email, or that could have been a
Crazy.
phone call, and it could have been. But don't forget to pick up the diamonds in the rough there. That I think that's the main thing, is that I think people, and it comes back to your original point about balance.
Mm.
We're still working in crazy times.
Yeah, we are.
We're learning and we're transitioning
Mm.
every single day.
And we're
Um,
transitioning to a more human way of
yeah,
working, of engaging, of which is much
yeah,
more, it goes back to the research, much more that moves from transactional to motivational. And the baseline of that has to be our intent. And energy is
yeah,
part of that. It's a huge part
absolutely.
of it. Positive energy just rubs off on everything around you.
It
So
does.
why
It
not be
does.
that vessel? It just makes sense, doesn't it?
I totally agree, and I find that my weekends, I always try and commit to, just doesn't always work out this way, but I try and commit to one big um event or I'll commit to one invitation, and then I'll do a catch up one-on-one or two-and-one with another person.
Fantastic. So you're
And
intentional
so I'm
around
intentional.
your own energy levels and how
Yep.
you bolster your energy levels, and removing those, energy vampires from your life.
Absolutely. It's
And
okay to say no. It's okay
yeah,
to say no.
exactly. Yeah.
I think that's the other trick is,
Yeah.
I care for my mum who's elderly and she lives on her own, and so I know my energy when I go and visit. It's all about having a positive impact on her, and making sure the conversations are as much value add, and they might be repetitive for me. um but it really God bless our parents.
But you
But
understand
it's
the impact. So, and
I
that's the
understand the
important. Yeah.
impact, and
Yeah.
so that can make such a difference. So I don't think
Yeah.
it's just reserved for work relationships either. I think it goes across the board in our lives, and yeah, if we're more intentional about it, I think we can achieve a hell of a lot,
Yeah.
and people will become look after themselves a little bit more. I think in the spirit of well-being, this was the other big point in our research. you know, that mental and emotional well-being piece is so important.
Yeah.
And it's become almost critical now. And we've seen it in statistics and we've seen it in many different roles. It's really important. So energy's all a part of that as well.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing
You are
so
so welcome.
generously. It's great to hear people's stories and how they're focusing and what's changed pre and post this wonderful time of our lives.
Yeah.
And I appreciate it. I appreciate the time and the energy. So, Joanna Geysen, thank you so much for joining us.
You're more than welcome, Louise Phelan. And what a wonderful book you've written. I can't wait to delve right into it, because I think what you've done is sensational, and well done to you.
Well, thank you very much. Hello, Louise Phelan here, and you've been listening to yet another Boost Talk, and I know you loved it. These women are being so generous with their time and their experience and their expertise, and it's great to have their perspective on their career enhancement strategies for women in this post-pandemic hybrid workplace that we find ourselves in. So for more information, head on over to our website, boostyourcareer.com.au, and I'll see you there.